Imagine waking up tomorrow. Your paycheck shows the exact same number, but its value has evaporated by half. Not because of inflation, but because the world has quietly decided they no longer need your money. In 1900, the British pound commanded 62% of global reserves. Today it is a ghost of its former self. History does not repeat, but it certainly rhymes. While Washington is paralyzed by internal political warfare, Beijing and Moscow have been stacking 1,000 tons of gold annually, constructing a parallel financial system right under Wall Street's nose. We are not talking about a sudden collapse tomorrow. We are witnessing a slow, calculated execution. The question is no longer if the dollar dynasty will fall, but simply where will you be standing when the music finally stops. Before we go any further, we must surgically remove a common delusion. Debt dollarization is not a sudden explosion. It is not a Hollywood ending where the currency hits zero overnight. That is a fantasy for the naive. What is actually happening is far more dangerous because it is boring. It is a silent revolution. The strategy is not a frontal assault. It is the great bypassing. Beijing is not trying to burn down the house. They are simply building a fireproof fortress next door. This new system operates on three ruthless principles. First, build a distinct path. Instead of fighting for control of the existing rails, they are laying down new tracks that bypass New York entirely. Second, escape the debt trap. They are systematically swapping American IOUs for assets that cannot be frozen or printed into oblivion. And third, they are anchoring their alliance in the physical world. While the West financializes everything, this new bloc is linking economies based on commodities, energy, metals, and food. As Pan Gongsheng, the governor of the People's Bank of China, stated with terrifying calm, this is not the death of the dollar, but the end of its solitude. The monopoly is over. But why are they doing this with such desperate speed? The motivation is not profit. It is not even power. It is pure biological survival. This parallel financial system did not emerge from a vacuum. It was forged in the fires of geopolitical desperation. The acceleration of the BRICS alliance began in earnest after 2014, but it reached a point of no return in 2022. This was the moment the world witnessed the ultimate betrayal of financial neutrality, the weaponization of the dollar. When Washington froze $300 billion of Russian foreign reserves overnight, they didn't just punish a rival, they sent a chilling message to every capital city on Earth. They proved that the dollar is no longer a neutral tool for global trade, but a political leash that can be yanked at any moment. For leaders in Beijing, New Delhi, and Riyadh, the logic shifted instantly. National security was now more important than economic efficiency. They realized that if the United States could seize the wealth of a nuclear power, their own assets were merely being held on borrowed time. The trust was shattered. To make matters worse, the master of the house began to look unstable. In early 2025, Fitch downgraded the U.S. credit outlook to negative, citing chronic political brinkmanship and a debt ceiling that has become a recurring nightmare. The gold standard of safety, U.S. Treasuries, suddenly looked like a high-risk gamble. The Global South decided they could no longer afford to bet their future on a bank that uses its ledger as a battlefield. Once that bond of trust is broken, you don't look for an apology, you look for an exit. They needed a new machine to run the world. A machine that doesn't answer to Washington. And this is exactly how that new engine began to hum. To understand how the dollar loses its grip, you have to look at the plumbing. For decades, every international transaction was a toll road leading straight through New York. If you wanted to buy oil in Riyadh or electronics in Seoul, you had to use SWIFT, a system Washington controls like a strategic faucet. But the BRICS bloc has just finished building an escape hatch. The first mechanism is the creation of a shadow infrastructure. China's CIPS and the decentralized BRICS Pay are not just alternatives. They are a sovereign bypass. By creating a cross-border network that never touches a US server, they've made the dollar invisible in their own backyard. Today, over 1,600 financial institutions across 110 countries are already using these new rails. For the first time in 80 years, Washington is losing its eyes. They can't sanction what they can't see, but a payment system is useless without a store of value. This leads to the second mechanism, the Great Liquidation. The world is witnessing a violent shift from paper promises to hard reality. When trust in American debt began to rot, the bloc stopped buying treasuries and started hoarding physical gold. China has slashed its holdings of US debt from $1.3 trillion to a staggering $800 billion. They are swapping IOUs for the only money that has never failed in 5,000 years. This isn't just an investment, it's a divorce. Finally, there is the Mars hypothesis. The most cynical piece of the puzzle. History teaches us that the reserve currency isn't chosen by GDP. It is chosen by the biggest stick. For years, the dollar was backed by the US military. But as China's naval and missile capabilities expand, the yuan is gaining a military premium. In this cold new logic, the RMB's value isn't just about trade. It's about the fact that it is now backed by a superpower that can protect its own trade routes. The fortress is complete, the gold is in the vault, and the ships are at sea. You might think this is just a geopolitical chess game on paper, but it has already been battle-tested. Just look at what happened when a global energy superpower was backed into a corner. A prime example of this mechanism in action is the survival of the Russian economy after 2020. When the West pulled the plug and cut Russia off from SWIFT, The consensus in Washington was that the ruble would be rubble within months. They were wrong. Instead of collapsing, Russia performed a strategic pivot. By the first quarter of 2025, a staggering 92.4% of trade between Russia and China was settled in yuan and rubles. The dollar, once the mandatory oxygen for global trade, was simply removed from the room, yet the Russian economy continued to breathe. This isn't just a minor shift. It is a proof of concept that proves the dollar is no longer the world's only life support system. But the data goes deeper than a single conflict. We are witnessing a massive, coordinated exit. In the first quarter of 2025 alone, capital outflows from dollar-denominated assets hit $327 billion, the highest level since the 2008 financial crisis. When the smart money starts running for the exits at a pace not seen in nearly 20 years, it isn't a coincidence, it's a signal. The system has moved from theory to reality. The blueprint for a post-dollar world has been battle-tested, and the results are undeniable. The unipolar world is fading into the rearview mirror. However, this de-dollarization virus isn't confined to a few rebellious superpowers. It is spreading through the very arteries of the global economy, and the next stage of its evolution is about to change the map of power forever. Over time, this alliance did not stop with its 5 original members. It has mutated and expanded into a global network that now controls the very lifeblood of the modern world. The bloc has strategically integrated the Middle East, with Iran and the United Arab Emirates officially joining the ranks. It has moved into Africa, welcoming Ethiopia, and establishing a partnership with Nigeria. In South America, despite political shifts in Argentina, Brazil continues to deepen its commitment to this new architecture. But the expansion is not just about geography. It is about a new variant of power, the control of energy and commodities. For half a century, the global economy was anchored by the petrodollar, an unwritten agreement that the world's oil would be sold only in US currency. That anchor is now being cut. As major OPEC Plus producers enter the BRICS orbit, we are witnessing the birth of the petrodollar. When the UAE and Iran settle energy contracts in local currencies or Chinese yuan, they are not just changing a label on a screen. They are removing the primary reason for central banks to hold vast piles of dollars. If you don't need dollars to buy oil, you don't need to store dollars in your vault. This expansion has created a bloc that now accounts for more than half of the world's population and a massive share of global GDP. By integrating the ECNY as a pillar for cross-border settlements through the BRICS bridge, they have automated the exit from the Western system. This is no longer a fringe protest. It is a structural takeover of the global supply chain. All of this might sound like distant news from the other side of the planet, but here is the cold reality. This global shift is about to land directly on your doorstep. This is exactly why you, sitting right here in America, should be worried right now. Today, you do not need to be a PhD economist to feel the foundation cracking. Every time you walk into a grocery store or pull up to a gas pump, you are already feeling the early tremors of de-dollarization. For decades, the United States exported its inflation because the world needed dollars to trade. We could print money, and the global market would soak it up like a sponge. But as the BRICS bloc builds its escape hatch, that sponge is becoming saturated. When the world stops needing those dollars, they eventually come home. This creates a domestic surge in the money supply that drives prices higher and keeps them there. Current projections suggest that as de-dollarization spreads, actual inflation in the US will likely remain stuck at a stubborn 4%. This isn't a temporary spike, it is a structural shift. The era of cheap money is dead. The interest rates on your mortgage, your car loan, and your credit card will likely never return to the historic lows of the last decade. Meanwhile, the US government faces a mathematical nightmare. As foreign nations like China and Russia dump their treasuries, there are fewer buyers for our massive national debt. To prevent a total collapse, the government is forced to print even more money to buy its own debt. This is the debt spiral, a feedback loop where printing money to pay for debt only leads to more inflation and higher interest rates. It is a trap with no easy exit. In early 2025, the credit outlook for the US was downgraded specifically because of this growing political and fiscal dysfunction. You feel trapped in the system because, frankly, the system is becoming trapped by its own weight. So we have to ask, who is the real enemy here? Is it China? Is it Russia? Or is it a monster of our own making? And here is the most critical realization. The erosion of the dollar's absolute reign is not merely a result of China's ambition. It is the inevitable outcome of American internal fractures. The monopoly is fracturing because of uncontrolled national debt, persistent political gridlock, and the strategic overreach of turning our currency into a weapon of war. By freezing sovereign assets and imposing unilateral sanctions, Washington didn't just punish its enemies. It signaled to its friends that the system is no longer safe or neutral. As early as February 2025, credit agencies like Fitch were already flagging this increasing political dysfunction as a core threat to American stability. History teaches us that reserve currencies move in cycles. The British pound held the crown for over a century before surrendering it to the dollar. Now the dollar is surrendering its solitude to a multipolar reality. We are moving toward a world where the USD, the yuan, and the euro will have to share the stage, a system where the UST can no longer print its way out of every crisis without consequence. In the first quarter of 2025 alone, the massive outflow of $327 billion from US assets showed that the smart money isn't waiting for a formal announcement. The great bypassing is already operational. The question is no longer whether we can stop this transition. It is a force of nature already in motion. The real question is how you will protect your own wealth as this multipolar world takes shape. When the rules of the game change, those who rely on old maps will find themselves lost. The Roman Empire did not collapse in a single day. It rotted from within, piece by piece, until a single push made it crumble. The financial system you have trusted your entire life is shifting beneath your feet. The smart money has already begun to move. They are no longer buying government debt, they are buying gold, real assets and insurance before the storm hits. 2026 may not be the end of the world, but it will be the year the rules of the game change forever. You can choose to ignore these signs and continue believing the reassurances on television. Or you can look at history and realize that no fiat currency lasts forever. China is building its own Noah's Ark, and the BRICS bloc is building theirs. Where is your escape plan? The cold truth is that when the tide goes out, we finally see who has been swimming naked, and the tide is going out. If you want to keep decoding the signals that Wall Street wants to hide, leave a number 1 in the comments. Subscribe to Financial Money History. Do not be the last one to know the truth.